there's any entrepreneurs in the room, investors in the room, regulators in the room, what would be potential areas to look into? May I know, maybe to start with a show of hand, who here knows a little bit about the blockchain cryptocurrency space? Can you show your hand so I have a little bit of an idea? Okay. Who of you does not know anything about that space? Be honest so I get some feeling on this as well. Okay, very interesting. May I know who of you has invested into cryptocurrencies? Bitcoin, Ethereum? Okay, very, very few of you. Okay, very interesting to hear. May I know who of you here has heard of my company TenX that we work out of Singapore of? Very few? Okay, thank you. Very interesting. Okay, let me maybe tell you a little bit about myself first. And then tell you a bit about what we do as our company, and then talk to you about how this technology of blockchain can get to the masses. Many people think when they see me that I must have a background out of finance, or have a background out of business, or I'm an engineer, but actually my background is completely different. My background is I'm a medical doctor. I studied in Austria. I always wanted to become a traumatologist, work in an ER room, help people that are injured. And that is because I was a professional athlete for 10 years prior to that. And so I'd seen a lot of really bad accidents. And what I didn't know when I was working at a hospital was that deep inside of me had always been this association of success with having options. So I always thought if I had different options, I was very successful. And when I was working in a hospital, suddenly I had no more options. All I had to do was I had to work 100 hours a week. I had to do this. There was no option B. And so I was really not fulfilled. And so when I was 25, I did what I think is every parent's nightmare. I had studied working as a doctor. I worked for a bit over a year, and then I quit working as a medical doctor and wanted to become an entrepreneur. My mom, she didn't talk to me for quite some time because she was so upset with me. And my grandma doesn't know until today that I'm actually not a doctor. She thinks that I live in Singapore and I work in a hospital because we never told her. However, one thing that was always relevant to me in having options was, to me that meant three things. It meant having financial success or financial possibilities. It meant that I had time, which is also very relevant when it comes to dying and living, and it comes to energy. And so I was always very interested in those three areas. And it was really a coincidence that in 2014, the beginning of 2014, 3.5 years ago, I met my other co-founder. I'm the third one here sitting, and then my co-founder is sitting on the very, very left, very short hair, Toby. He had studied artificial intelligence. And I met with him in a total coincidence, and he told me about this new thing called blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and how this is going to change not only the financial world, but everything beyond that. And that was so exciting to me, because suddenly I had found this mission in myself of having options, and I found a solution in distributed ledger technologies, in a decentralized system, in a system that can be accessed by anyone, that knows no borders. And I started to learning about this, and I started to read and understand this. And to me, one thing was really clear. The technology is fantastic. But if this technology doesn't get to people in a very, very easy, understandable way, it's never going to be a success. It's never going to survive. It's never going to succeed. And so we sat down and we thought, hey, how can we, Toby and I and Paul is the one in the middle of us, how can we do something to bring cryptocurrencies, to bring blockchain to the masses? And we came down with 3 points. And I want to talk to you about the 3 points that we had talked about. But then I want to inspire you, especially here in Malaysia, and for those that are not from here, you can apply the same things all around the world. What you can do, not only in your region, but pretty much global, in this ecosystem, and what this would mean for potential growth. Now, for those that are here, and you might be thinking, may I know, maybe show of hands, who of you thinks that this entire thing of cryptocurrencies and blockchain is a bit of a dangerous thing, some scammy stuff? No offense, I just want to understand. Please be honest so I get a little bit. I'm feeling with you, because that's what I thought as well at the beginning. Okay, great. I speak at a lot of conferences. I speak with regulators. I speak with central banks. I had lunch with Christine Lagarde from the International Monetary Fund and discussed with her the potentials of a blockchain and cryptocurrencies. So trust me, when I say I'm being hit almost every day by people who believe that what I'm working on or what we are working on is actually BS, it's not going to work, then I'm feeling for that because I really hit that. And so I, on a daily basis, don't want to convince people that this is as big or maybe even bigger than the internet, but that at least people should look into this and understand the power of it. The World Economic Forum predicts that over the next 7-8 years, 10% of the entire economic output, and that's huge, will be represented on blockchain. We're talking about trillions of dollars that are stored in these decentralized ledger technologies. And for those of you that have never heard of this, let me give you the simplest, easiest analogy what a blockchain or what a cryptocurrency is. Has any one of you heard about the Yup Islands in the South Pacific? May I know, show of hands, Yup Islands? They are a very interesting group of islands in the South Pacific. And they didn't have any gold on this island. They didn't want to put a bank in charge either to print some paper money. So their question was, how can we create money? What are we going to use for money? And they came up with so-called ray stones. Ray stones, and you can look them up on the internet, are humongously big sandstones that the islanders carved out of the ground. And basically, anyone, and this is really, really important, anyone could, if they wanted to, create these sandstones. So it was not that one central authority had the power to create something. And I'm not talking only about money. I'm just talking about to create something. But it was every islander was able to do this. They could just go and dig and create these limestones. Now, it was a lot of work, and it was really, really a lot of effort. So actually, a minority of the people did that. The majority of the people provided normal services. They sold regular products, just like normal. And in return, they received these limestones, these so-called ray stones. And so these ray stones became money. They were a medium of exchange. They were a store of value. They were a unit of account, all things that are really, really relevant to a currency. But there was just one problem. These humongous ray stones were a nightmare to transport. Because, I mean, you had to carry them around, and then you went to a store, and at the end, all you wanted to buy was a little bit of bread, and you had this huge stone that you had to kind of carry around. And the islanders got really frustrated about this. So they came up with a very ingenious idea. Instead of transporting the stones, why not put the stones somewhere in front of a church or in front of a landmark or in front of a house? And if I pay someone, instead of giving that person the stone, I just tell the entire community that I gave that person the stone. And once the majority of the community knew about it, I basically gave someone a stone without actually giving someone that stone. And so over a really short amount of time, instead of actually passing on stones, the knowledge of who owns a stone was passed on. And this system was fantastic. And if you understand that system of ray stones being passed around, but not physically, but by ownership, you understand how a blockchain works. What a blockchain does is, instead of passing on a physical stone, something virtual on the internet is passed around, and the blockchain does nothing else than record who actually received that stone. Everyone that is part of a blockchain keeps a copy of it and copies down who receives what. And they do this on a regular basis. So instead of me passing on the stones and having to tell everyone who I gave a stone, I tell a community on the internet, hey, listen, I just did X. And as soon as the majority of the internet understood that, I knew I did X. And the larger the community of the internet gets, the bigger the proof that I actually did that. Just like on an island. If there's just 3 people on that island, well, it's not so powerful. But if there's 1,000 people and they can all attest that I had given a stone to someone, wow, fantastic. So that is a blockchain. A blockchain is a transaction history of what has been happening in a community, and every participant in that community agrees to that transaction history. A cryptocurrency is nothing else than one application of that blockchain. And it is about who received how much money. And the most popular one, and most of you have heard about it, is Bitcoin. Bitcoin got started in 2009, got started by a group or by some anonymous person or what pseudonym called Satoshi Nakamoto, and got passed on. And at the first couple of years, no one believed in this, because who would believe that the ownership that's passed around virtually by agreement by the others is actually worth something at some point? And today, almost 9 years later, the entire world literally agrees on one thing. They agree that this idea of a blockchain, of a decentralized ledger, of instead of having to pass on stones, I can pass on the knowledge of who owns the stone, is going to be the next revolution to probably 50 different industries. It's going to be the revolution to the banking system with cryptocurrencies. It's going to be the entire revolution to real estate. It's going to be a revolution to the medical system. It's going to be a revolution to how data is stored. Because instead of storing it in one place, it can be stored everywhere, and it's not possible to hack it anymore. It's the most powerful tool for cars that want to be self-driving. One of the biggest risks right now with self-driving cars is, what if someone hacks that car, and that car runs into a wall? Well, what if you can't hack that car? Because that car is just a little piece of the entire organism. If you lose one cell, you don't die. And that's just like that car, because you consist out of trillion cells. Our body is not completely decentralized, but it's very, very decentralized in a lot of manners. And that's the same thing. So that prediction of the World Economic Forum, in my opinion, is actually a very, very underestimation, because I think this prediction is going to be huge. I think it's going to go way faster than many, many people believe, because as soon as people understand what these things are, how these things work, it's going to be working with lightning speed. The people who 25 years ago understood what internet meant to an offline business, and they prepared for it, these people won. And people who sat there and said, no, never ever will someone buy a book online. Never ever will someone order a taxi online. All these industries that stayed offline, they are either lost already or they're losing out now. And I tell you, blockchain is going to do the same thing, not only to finance, not only to some real estate, not to the most obvious kind of areas, but to the entire economic system. And that's what's the really powerful thing. And so, to be honest, you are part of the 0.1% of the entire world who today, after this 30 minutes, and then we're going to do a Q&A afterwards, will understand this technology, will understand what it takes to take it from here to there. And you will be able to apply it to your own business. If you're an investor, you understand what to invest in and what not to invest in. If you're a regulator here, you will understand what to pay attention to. And that's kind of my entire goals for this. So, let's work this through. If we want blockchains, cryptocurrencies to work, to be accessible, to be usable, to get to the masses, all we actually have to do is we have to look at the internet. What did the internet do? The internet is a new technology, that's all it is. So what did the internet do that we can learn from the blockchain? Well, the first thing the internet did was it made it usable. And this is such a key concept, because one of the major problems right now in blockchain is, even after 9 years, there's very, 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 very few use cases. Very few non-artificial use cases. And this is something that's so simple. Because if there were more use cases, people would instantly understand the power of it. So let me quickly tell you what I do at our company, TenX. We're Singapore-based, we're 50 employees, and what we make cryptocurrencies usable. All around the world, anytime, anywhere. And the way we do this is, we have a debit card. People can download an app, we have a debit card, and people can fund this debit card with cryptocurrencies. So they can connect it with Bitcoin, with Ethereum, with Dash, and different tokens. And they can do this all over. So the power of this is, suddenly, your cryptocurrencies are actually usable in a store, anywhere. I sat with a very, very high official in Singapore, and we talked about regulation, and we talked about what to do. And his biggest complaint from him to me was, listen, if we let you operate here, I mean, cryptocurrencies are not usable. They are completely virtual. There's no use case. And I said, you know what? Let's just go down to Starbucks, and I buy you a cappuccino, I have a tea, and I pay for it with Bitcoin. And I showed him, because we have an app, so it's live, and I showed him on my phone how I was paying with Bitcoin at Starbucks this very moment. And that changed his entire perspective. Instead of him being against blockchain and virtual currencies, he suddenly started to be very open, because he started to see the power of what was possible. This could happen in many, many other areas that we are not involved in. So I just want to inspire some use cases that you could work on. Ownership, real estate, any type of ownership. At the moment, any type of ownership is completely centralized. It takes one authority, one institution that dictates who owns what. Let's put the power problem aside, that this central authority can become bad or can be kind of prejudiced. Let's put this aside. Just think of the risks of an attack. The only thing you have to attack of the ownership is that central authority. If you attack it, everything is changed. In a blockchain, there's nothing to attack, because you would have to attack every single participant. And the larger the blockchain gets, it's impossible. So instead of a bank losing money, it's not possible anymore. Instead of any company losing data because there was a hack, it's not possible anymore. Any type of data storage, any type of ownership, real estate, and so on, extremely powerful for a blockchain. Think about computer programs. There's a blockchain called Ethereum, and Ethereum is pretty much the largest decentralized computer in the world. What does that mean? It's very simple. Instead of having one central computer that runs the program, the same program is run on every participant of that blockchain. So it's not, you can't stop it anymore. Now, to be fair, there's not many use cases yet on Ethereum that are pretty legit. But for those of you that have been following the ecosystem, there's a pretty hilarious one coming up over the past months, actually, and it's called CryptoKitties. CryptoKitties is, in my opinion, a really weird use case. But it shows that there is some actual use case there. CryptoKitties are little collectible virtual kitties. They're nothing else than pictures of a cat. And these cats look either really funny, really weird, really pretty, really ugly. The powerful thing is, since no one owns these cats per se, there's no controlling entity. These cats, even though they are virtual, are actually rare. Because no one can go and copy a cat. No one can go and just change the number of different cats. It's not possible, because everyone would have to agree on it. I don't know if there's any gamers in the room. If you look at World of Warcraft, actual games, there's a big, big challenge there with this virtual money, with a sword, or with a new kind of tool. The tool is only valuable in the game because it's rare, or because only one person has it, because no one else can cheat. What if there was no cheating? What if the cheating was simply not possible? And in a game like CryptoKitties, which is really weird, and it's a very basic game, because all you do is you trade these virtual cats with each other, it shows, though, the power of having a system where you can't cheat. It shows the power of a system that actually is fault-proof. And this can be applied to so many other things. The key, though, is usability. So for those of you that are sitting here and you are interested in this ecosystem, don't try to come up with this weird, difficult, technological thing. Come up with a very, very smart, easy, straightforward use case. Solve a problem. Don't try to create the problem, and then find a solution. There's a problem everywhere, and we have inefficiencies in everything. Ethereum, for example, the computer, will allow to have contracts with each other, called smart contracts. And in a smart contract, I can do a deal with someone else, and I don't have to trust that person. I can say, listen, I'm going to sell you an apartment. The apartment is, I don't know, 500,000 ringgit. You give me the money, you get the apartment. But you only get the apartment after I have your money. So the other person is going to say, no, I'm not going to do this, because if you have the money, you're not going to give me the apartment. Okay, so what's the solution? Well, the solution in traditional world is I have a third party that I have to trust. That person gets the apartment, gets the money, and then does the change. Quite expensive, quite slow, very traditional. What if this can be done in a computer system, instant, with literally no fees? This is extremely powerful, and it works for any type of sale. It works on any online transaction. It would work for any peer-to-peer kind of transaction. And this is something that's going to change the entire kind of trade system, how the internet changed offline businesses. For those of you that want to try this out for ourselves, download our app, TenX. You can download this on iOS, you can download it on Android, and just experience it for yourself. I think this is always the most important part. It's always experience. Rather than listening to me, try it out yourself. It is extremely, extremely powerful. Another thing that this ecosystem allows, it allows for this new type of raising funds for a startup. We had one of the most successful, one of the largest, one of the most documented ICOs in cryptocurrency history. Now, what's an ICO? Well, instead of getting funds and investment from traditional investors, you can go create your own cryptocurrency and you sell that cryptocurrency to buyers. And you swap other cryptocurrencies for it. That's what we did in June. We received $80 million worth of cryptocurrencies for selling people our own cryptocurrency, which is a loyalty program. Now, it's really interesting to do this as a company, trust me. However, here's a big warning. Don't do this in a scammy way. Check with your regulators, because many, many regulators have rules in how you do this and how you're allowed to do it and what you're not allowed to do. If you are a potential buyer of these new called tokens, be aware that you buy tokens from a startup. Even though we're one of the most funded startups in the world, we're still a startup. And even though we do our best every single day, we are really small and we can still fail. And this is really, really important because I think many, many people, when they buy tokens from such a young company, they expect that this company is like an enterprise, it's like a corporate, it's like a multi-billion dollar business. It's not. It's a couple $100 million. It's really, really, really tiny and small. And this is very important for you as a business to maybe start and raise some funds, very attractive, but it's also very dangerous for the token buyer. If both interests are met in a very nice way, this can be extremely powerful for ecosystems, especially as mentioned before, where maybe the funding is missing. I speak in a lot of places in the world where people say, look, in our area, it's very difficult to start a company because the funding in our area, the local fundraising is really difficult. We don't have an ecosystem of VCs, an ecosystem of angels. It's really missing. Blockchain, with this new type of fundraising called ICOs, initial coin offerings, extremely powerful as a use case for fundraising. Now, let's talk about the second step. The second step is it needs a really easy access into the ecosystem. So it's not only about easy usability, it's about easy access. The easy access can't come first. If you have an easy access without easy usability, what's going to happen is people don't want to enter it because there's no point. So at the moment, what we're seeing, we actually see a lot of kind of ideas, a lot of focus on technology, but very little convenience, very little usability. And this is something we all have to change. If we had to download WhatsApp or Line or WeChat, and we had to study all the protocols before that, no one would download these messaging apps. Because what everyone wants to do is everyone wants to go to the Play Store, App Store, download the app, and communicate with their friends. But they don't want to listen to all the blah, blah, blah that goes behind on a technical standpoint. Some people do, most people don't. And the ecosystem right now goes the opposite way. They require everyone to understand everything about blockchain and technology and so on. So I think there's actually 3 components to making this step really, really successful. The first one is education. Education for the user, education for companies, education for governments and central regulators. That's also one of my personal kind of missions. That's why I wrote a book called Cryptocurrency, super simple. It's one of the best sellers on Amazon on exactly that topic. So if you want to understand the topic of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, Trust me, get that book within 2 days. You are a near expert in that field without needing any technical detail knowledge. And that's the real important part. But aside of educating consumers, there's something that all of us as entrepreneurs, as business owners have to do. And that is, we all have to make sure that our users don't need to understand all the technical jargon. They need to have familiar options. I'll give you an example. When we thought about making cryptocurrencies spendable, we were approached by many, many companies that are very innovative. For example, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay. Companies, may I know, show of hands, who of you here has used Samsung Pay or Apple Pay? I just want to know so I get a bit of a show of hand. Okay? Who of you here has used a credit card? Show of hands. You see the difference? The difference is, had we gone with Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, or WeChat Pay maybe 2 years ago, we would have had to convince many of you of two things. First of all, that cryptocurrencies are great, and second, that Samsung Pay or WeChat Pay is great. So we had to take a bit of an older system, credit cards, that are used by most of you, because you're familiar with this. A lot of companies today in the blockchain ecosystem, they are so futuristic, they go so many steps forward, that it's so difficult for the average person to sit there and think, what is this actually? This is so far ahead. I don't even understand the steps in between. So do something one step at a time. Don't look for things that are 10 steps ahead, because the people are not going to be able to associate with this. In my opinion, that's why CryptoKitties, even though it's such a silly, simple game, actually succeeds. Because the idea of trading cards with someone, collecting something, like collecting stickers or stamps or trading, swapping, it's ingrained in all of us. We know kids who sit there and all they do is play magic cards or collect little Beanie Babies, whatever. And this concept is so simple. So suddenly doing this on a digital level, it's clear for everyone. It's not the first game. There's so many other games that have been tried and failed because they are so complex. They are so difficult. So someone who sits here and you're working on something very simple, believe me, you have more success in being like a breakthrough here in this ecosystem than if you went and did all the complicated stuff. The last thing is security, certainty, stability. A lot of reasons why people don't move into that ecosystem, and that's the third part. So the first one is usability, second one is easy access, and the third one is certainty or stability or whatever word you want to call it. The reason why many people don't want to move into it is because it's difficult to maneuver around, but also because of price fluctuations, because of uncertainties with regulators, because of uncertainties what's going to be next. For the regulators here, in the room, or listening, we need some regulation, but we don't need too much regulation. This sweet spot of regulation is so difficult, and we see some countries doing it totally wrong by doing no regulation. For example, the US. And we see countries like China who do the exact opposite, and they over-regulate. The US, in my opinion, is so worried right now that they regulate too much, too little, that what they do is they just stand back and say, you know what, we're not going to do anything right now. Cryptocurrencies, we don't care much about it. Yes, you have to pay taxes on it, most important thing, but we don't regulate, we don't care. Do what you want. And everyone knows this is not true. Everyone knows they just wait until they draw the line, and then they watch who is on the one side of the line and who's on the legal side of the line. And that's why the US in blockchain does not have much regulation. The reason, for example, Switzerland is doing so well is because they have very, very clear regulations for blockchain and cryptocurrencies. It's crystal clear. This is legal, this is illegal. And this is what this ecosystem needs. It does not need over-regulation. Over-regulation, I think, is always not a good choice. But no regulation is also not the best. So all the regulators, they need this. What companies have to do, and this is, for example, a project we are working on called Comet, and anyone is welcome to join that project. We want to have an agnostic standard of blockchains. an agnostic way for blockchains to communicate with each other. So for the user, it's not relevant. What is Bitcoin? What is Ethereum? What is Dash? What is Ripple? What are all these things? It's really complicated. That's why I'm not going in. Yes, I understand, because it's confusing. But if it's agnostic, if it's very easy to maneuver in between, around, and kind of have a very easy way, fantastic. And this is applicable to any business, to any ecosystem, really to all these types that we have, no matter what your background is. For those of you that sit here and you're like, I don't have any finance background, I have no business background, I have no engineering background. I don't have either. It is not relevant. To be honest, there's a lot of studies that actually show that if you don't have expertise in a certain field, if you actually come from the outside, many times you can be way more successful. Because you don't have preconceived ideas. You actually come maybe with completely new ideas. One thing you need to have, though, you need to have the belief that you can learn anything that you put your mind to. And that's something that's really important. And I think many, many people believe once they study something or once they do something, they can never shift away from this. You can always learn this. And it's actually quite straightforward. And there's so many great tools today in all this from learning. So what does this entire ecosystem need? It needs very easy usability, very easy access, and it needs certainty and stability. One thing that doesn't come up there, but gets discussed so much, is good technology. It might surprise you, but many, many people think the internet is a great technology. The way the internet is structured is actually quite crap. It's not a good technology. And it still had the breakthrough and is used all over the world with a standard. And the reason is because of those three things. We in cryptocurrencies and blockchain need exactly the same thing. And no matter what field you're in, no matter what area you're in, the economy needs it. People strive for it, they look for it, they start to grab it. And I promise you, for those of you that have seen the huge hype that the internet had over the past 25 years, this is the next wave that we have started maybe 1-2 years ago, and it's gonna be happening for the next 20-25 years, and probably way, way, way beyond that. If you ask me what payments will look like, and this maybe ties in a bit to what you heard before, I didn't hear anything about payments. What will payments look like in the next 15, 20 years? The way I envision it is, we are neural linked with the merchant, and instead of having to pay anything, we just tell that merchant we're paying with our thoughts. What are we paying? Well, we are linked up with all the assets on a blockchain. They are agnostic, they're connected. This can be gold, real estate, any type of currency, any type of loyalty program token, any stock, anything that has value. A crypto kitty. And hopefully, a very smart machine automatically selects for us the best kind of pool of assets that we are using right now. And we might be spending a little bit of some loyalty points, one crypto kitty, one part of a currency, a little bit of gold, and we just bought a new car. And this is how payment's going to be extremely seamless, open to everyone in the entire world. Anyone in the world will have the same rights when it comes to payments. And that is, in my opinion, why blockchain is going to succeed, because this is what the entire world needs. They need options, because at the end of the day, options do have the power to make people successful and make people fulfilled. So with this, I'm really looking forward to some questions if you have. And other than that, thank you so much. I was told if there's any questions, there's 2 microphones. You can step forward. Any question on the ecosystem, blockchain, cryptocurrencies. If you have questions, let's limit some questions on our company, TenX. I'm happy to answer a couple, but I would prefer more blockchain or the ecosystem. And we have around 25 minutes, so we can go for quite some questions. Yeah, thank you. Let's start on the right, and let's alternate.
Hi, Dr. Hosp. My name's Sean, and my question is on your company, actually. So I'm interested in knowing how does TenX intend to cope with British startup Revolut?
With what, sorry?
British startup Revolut. So they do a similar thing, but they do it for fiat.
Revolut.
Yes.
I think Revolut is doing a really great job. for us, they're definitely on, let's say, on the competitor map. I think what they are really strong in is right now is the fiat side, so traditional money side. Let's see how good they are on the cryptocurrency side. It's one thing just to offer a cryptocurrency on the app. It's a different one, allow people to get in and out. The actual trading, honestly, I think they are a fair competitor. I think they're doing a great job. Let's hope they keep pushing because it's going to help the entire system. And we're not going to be the only company in the world providing a debit card. I think that's also really clear. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, great question. Thank you.
My name is Sami Hassan. I work also in an AI blockchain company. My question is for you is, which one do you think is more dangerous that's going to probably make problems for the blockchain? Do you think it's the greediness of the investors or the lack of adoption from the public people?
Fantastic question. I get this question. Maybe I can also add something to that question. I get asked a lot, Julian, do you think we are in a bubble? Yes. First of all, I hope we are in a bubble. And yes, I think we are in a bubble. This might surprise some of you. I think bubbles are extremely necessary for the economic machine. Bubbles drive companies. Bubbles drive entire markets. I think what we are doing at TenX and what many other companies are doing would not be possible had we not seen this massive kind of upstream right now of cryptocurrencies. So to answer your question, I think what could hurt people more is if really the entire public would not understand the power of this. I highly doubt, this is a very unlikely scenario, so I personally think that all the greedy people, they're going to make some money over the short time. They're all going to get burned, just like many, many, many people got burned during the dot-com bubble with cryptocurrencies, because let's face it, 99% of cryptocurrencies at this very moment have no use case, will never have a use case, and investors will get burned. And that's okay. But during that time when there's an upstream, it helps companies to grow, which is really, really needed for a new ecosystem to come up. And the risk of the adoption not happening is there, but I think it's not as of a big relevance as the danger could be. Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Julian. My name is Zarif, and I have two very brief questions. The first one is between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. Which one do you support? Bitcoin?
Sorry, can you repeat? Because
okay, cool. So I have two questions. The first one is about Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. Are you siding with Roger Ver or Charlie Lee? And the second question is between 10X and Monaco, for instance, because both companies offer debit cards. What is your unique selling proposition? Thank you.
Fantastic question. So maybe give some context here. There's one challenge in Bitcoin, and you need to understand this. If we talk about Raystones again, and we are pushing around Raystones, the information, there's a certain amount of limit of information that can be transacted every second, because I need to tell everyone that I just gave someone a Raystone. I can't give this Raystone to someone and basically have to tell everyone I gave that Raystone. So there's a certain limit, and we call this as a transaction limit every second or every block. And Bitcoin has this transaction limit of around 6 to 7 transactions per second. Now, it got improved with an update called SegWit where it was doubled. So now at the moment, we could have around 10 to 12 transactions per second, which is really, really low. Don't get me wrong. There's solutions to this, but it's really, really low. Give you some context. Visa transacts thousands of transactions every second, right? So there's a lot more. So in August, there was this really big discussion. I mean, this discussion has been going on for a very long time. There was this discussion of a group around a mining community in China and one very early investor called Roger Ver, who said, you know what, we should allow for something new to have 8 times as many transactions per second or per time amount. And they called this Bitcoin Cash. And they made a so-called fork, so that means they just split off as a community. And to be honest, I don't think Bitcoin Cash is a fair name, so I prefer to call it Bcash, because it has very, very little to do with what Bitcoin does and what Bitcoin has to do. Let me explain. Bitcoin has more of this vision of becoming digital gold. None of you here, I think, pay with gold on a daily basis, at least to my knowledge. But many people all around the world buy gold as a very unique and kind of general store of value. And that's what I think Bitcoin is going to be. Bitcoin, in my opinion, is not going to be something that people are going to pay with every single day. It's going to be some rescue or some place to go to if a central authority fails. Bcash goes a totally different route. They want to be a currency that's used all around the world, all the time, constantly. Here are a couple of struggles, and I think you feel already which way I tend, and I'm way more, like I would say 99% a Bitcoin supporter versus a Bcash supporter. And that has to do with some technical limitations, especially when it comes to so-called Lightning Network, that Bcash does not allow for. Bcash just doesn't have that. Plus, if a blockchain is 8 times more transactions, it grows 8 times faster because it takes so much more size. And this is extremely limiting, and it's a real problem. So I don't see Bcash being able to fulfill what they're going to do. I see there's way more political and way more power-hungry reasons driven behind it, why this currency is driven by a few individuals that you mentioned as well. And I think Bitcoin goes its purpose of being a stable rescue place for digital gold. That's my answer on that. To answer TenX and Monaco in this case, I think it doesn't apply only to the company you mentioned, but I think it applies to any company. I don't compare ourselves with an idea. I think it's, like, to me, Revolut has a working product, has actual users, is a really fair comparison. And we have to sit down and look, okay, so where's Revolut doing better? Where are we doing better as a company? And this applies to every company. Anyone can sit down and can have an idea and can promise something. If someone doesn't have customers, someone doesn't have revenue, I'm not judging them, I'm just saying I can't compare ourselves to this company, because at the end of the day, I could come down and say, you know what, there's Apple, I'm gonna have a better phone than them, someone, it's gonna be almost free for everyone, it's gonna be better, everything better. They're not gonna take me serious. They're gonna take me serious when I am Samsung, who suddenly comes up and has this phone. And to me, this is the same thing, even at the startup level. Ideas are so cheap, execution trumps an idea all day long, and a great company is way better than good execution. Because a great company can sometimes suffer, can sometimes trump medium execution, because a good company with great team members can really outplay a lot of things. So I would answer that question once any other company in that space has a card out, has a product out, has something, then I'm happy to compare and look at that. And I don't know when this is going to happen, because most of these companies have been talking for quite some time. But I think that's the key part. Yeah, but great question, thank you.
Hi, Julian. My name is Husni. Actually, what you explained just now kind of set me up for the question I have. Besides Bitcoin, that you would think would become a gold standard, what other cryptocurrencies you think will become like Bitcoin, a gold standard for financial? Thank you.
Great question. I mean, I think the question would be, what would be like gold in the real world? I think there's only one gold. I think many other precious metals would have the potential to be gold, but gold took that place to be gold. So I think there's no other cryptocurrency at the moment that could have the power like Bitcoin. And that simply has to do, and I know there's always critics out there who point out some technical difficulties of Bitcoin, but again, the technical difficulties are not as relevant as adoption. And literally any company right now in the crypto ecosystem is based on Bitcoin. If anyone would want to change that, every company would have to change the underlying infrastructure. So it would be like, yes, Facebook could be replaced, but it would need that everyone at the same time would switch from Facebook to another social media app. Now, obviously, Bitcoin is by far not as adopted and not as large, but the concept still applies there. So I think it's very, very difficult to actually push Bitcoin off its throne, because even centralized cryptocurrencies from a government are going to have a struggle actually going against Bitcoin. So I don't see so much someone pushing away Bitcoin, but just like with gold, there's different use cases. There's silver, there's platinum, there's so many other precious metals, and they all have their use case. And we see similar things popping up. I definitely think, for example, more private cryptocurrencies just like Ripple, just like Monero, just like Zcash, just like Dash, for example, to have some really relevance. Which one of those three is still debatable. I do think that's something that's a bit more centralized, maybe like Litecoin, because there is a founder who is, and I'm not saying Litecoin is centralized, but maybe a bit more centralized. It could be something like silver to gold. I think this is something that's very interesting. Pushing Bitcoin off its throne, I think, if I would have to make a bet, I would say 87 to 88% is not going to happen. So with a very, very small probability, Bitcoin could be pushed off its throne, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Hi, Dr. Julian. My name is Elvin, and I have two questions for you. As we all know, blockchain and distributed ledger is created for transactions to be transparent and decentralized. But however, if you look at the current situation, an ordinary user of a cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin has no say in the community. Most of the voting powers are based on held by the node owners or those with mining pools with the most mining powers. What is your opinion? This is my first question. And my second question is, the identity of a single person in the blockchain is heavily relies on the private key. Should someone lose the private key and he lost his entire identity on the blockchain, this is contra to the current centralized system we use. Is there any solution for this on the blockchain? Thank you.
Fantastic questions. Let's talk about whether the individual user actually has a say in this. I think the question applies to every government. I think the question applies in a democracy. Why go and vote? Does your one vote make a difference? No, this one vote does not make a difference. But as a whole, as a community, it does make a difference. So to put this into blockchain, yes, you're right. As one user, mainly because you outsource everything to an app or to something, you have a very little say or very little influence. But I think as a community, and we see this over and over again, I think we do have power to shift certain things around. The fact, in my opinion, rather, is that the people who scream, who complain, are always the majority, it seems like it. If you ever go to, let's say you go to Malaysia Airways on their Facebook page, and you look through the comments on Malaysia Airways on their Facebook page, what do you think does their Facebook page look like? It looks like a nightmare, because everyone complains. My luggage got lost, my luggage got lost, my luggage got lost. Do you think they lose your luggage all the time? No. They are one of the safest airlines in the world, and that's a really important part. But the majority complains. So when we go on social media on Reddit, and we listen and we look there, well, we see 50 people complaining. And we think, man, the majority, they really think there's a problem with this. While the people who don't care, because everything is working fine, they're just quiet. They don't care. Hey, my flight was perfect. I got my luggage. I'm not going to go on Facebook and post, hey, great job. My luggage arrived on time. No one does that. So that's exactly the same there. So I think sometimes it looks as if a majority complains, but the question you should ask is this just a minority who's super loud and could never split off because it's just too few people, or is there actually substantial power behind it? And trust me, I work in a company and we're being hit on social media on a regular basis. And there's sometimes 5 people who can shout as if there were 5,000, and 5,000 can sometimes be as quiet as no one. So I think this is the really important part, because just like in democracy, every vote counts, but not the individual. That's a key part. Your second question, I forgot. What was the second question?
My second question is about the identity in the blockchain is heavily relies on a private key.
So you're totally right. This is a big problem, the handling of the private key. There's, to my knowledge, not a good solution yet. The best solution I know are so-called hard wallets. I can highly recommend anyone that's in this space to invest 80, 90, 100 US dollars for a so-called hard wallet. There's 2 companies that are really large that provide them. One is called Ledger, the other one is called Treasure, and they're all really, really solid and really, really good. To my knowledge today, I don't know a good solution, and I think this is one of the biggest opportunities. It's such a simple thing to solve, but whoever solves this management of private keys, which are either strings of digits or words, 24 words, 12 words, random words. If someone manages to solve that, seriously, you're gonna be huge. You're gonna make tons of money. It's just that no one thinks of such a simple thing to solve. Everyone thinks of the really complicated things to solve. And like today, when people come to us, they're like, man, this is such a simple thing to make these cryptocurrencies spendable. Yeah, but you know what? No one thought of this. And yes, we are long, and now there's a lot of copycats. But before, no one was thinking of this. And it's the same with your solution for anything that's really, really simple. So I think especially in this ecosystem, look for the simple solutions. Don't try to come up with complex crap, because no one's going to use it. It's really about the simple, easy things. Thanks.
Hi, Dr. Julian. Great talk. Thank you so much. My name is Jan from a company called Leaderpreneur. I'd like to ask you about your vision for the financial landscape. So looking to maybe 2025, what do you see the new financial world being? Do you see startups like yourself disrupting the incumbents and being the new kings of the hill? Do you see the existing banks somehow fighting back and either beating back the startups or finding a sort of a truce, a partnership economy? Or third option, do you see an opportunity for totally new players, someone like Alibaba, Tencent, Facebook, Google, Amazon, to come in out of left field and take over this space of financial services? And on the theme of second question, very quickly as well, what's the Bitcoin price going to be in 2025? Just for fun.
When Bitcoin, what year?
In 2025, just to wrap it up.
Okay, fantastic. So I think you mentioned it already, and I totally think the solution is just like we don't want to have a dictator who kind of is super, super hateful and is the only one in charge and can do whatever. And just like we don't want to have anarchy where no one is in charge and there's absolute chaos, the solution, the golden middle, is always somewhere in between. And I think in the internet we found that. In the internet we have centralized companies who provide a service with a certain trust, with a certain authenticity, with certain regulation, and with certain non-regulation. And it took us, I don't know, 20 years to get there, and it's probably still not finished. In crypto, we got nothing of that yet. I think right now, people still believe, yeah, startups like TenX, they're gonna disrupt everyone, and they're gonna get everyone out of business. That's not true. And it's also not gonna true that all central companies will go and destroy all the decentralized companies. Again, like you mentioned, it's gonna be somewhere in the middle, and it's gonna be those companies that find that middle who are really gonna win. It's us looking for partnerships with centralized companies, literally. Like, because we understand that, yes, we come from a very decentralized place, we need to find that golden middle. And I think it's those companies that always wanna stay decentralized, they're really, really, really gonna struggle because there's pure chaos. No one is in charge. Humans want someone in charge, but they don't want the wrong person in charge, and they want to have the option to put that wrong person out of charge. And in many, many systems, this is not possible. In a fair and good system, it's possible. And my answer is always, decentralization is not the future. It's just the counterparty to centralization that's needed in so many environments, so that centralization has to step up their game and cannot stop fooling around and screwing around with many people. So that's my answer to decentralization, centralization. My answer to the Bitcoin price, I couldn't tell you where it's going to be 2025. Let me tell you something. On this journey from today on, we're going to see at least $100,000 in between. And we're going to see, again, probably $3,000. We are now, I don't know, what's the price today? 16,000, 17,000. So we're right now at 16, 17,000. So we're definitely going to see at least 100,000, and we're going to see 3,000. I don't know which one we're going to see first. So either we're going to see 80% down, or we're going to see, I don't know, a 6, 7x minimum. It could be more up. Yeah, that would be my answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Jun. My name is Jason. I'd like to ask, how do you see quantum computing affecting the blockchain technology?
Great question. When people hear that the blockchain gets hacked or something gets hacked, what the media actually talks about is that an account of someone, the app, or it's just like a phishing attack was happening. So the blockchain if the blockchain was hacked, it would mean that the algorithm of how cryptography works gets hacked. And so far, this is impossible because computers, even if there was a computer that would be as large as planet Earth, it would take trillions of years until a computer would be close to possible to hacking the system. And it would actually cause a lot of other problems because the internet would get hacked and so on. There's one exception. That exception is quantum computing. Quantum computing has a huge upside on a very small use case. For most use cases, quantum computing is pretty pointless because it doesn't work. But on something like cryptography, quantum computing is extremely powerful. And you're right, would quantum computing be powerful enough to back calculate the cryptography of Bitcoin and many other systems? Initially, there would be a huge crash, probably below 3,000, probably into the hundreds, because everyone would be worried that their money's gone. But we have seen already cryptography that's so-called quantum computing resistant. QRL, for example, is a company that's working on this, and many, many, many other companies are working on this as well. And within probably a few days or a few weeks, all the large cryptocurrencies would get replaced with their cryptography. It would still be the same currency, and I think it would be solved. So in this case, I think it would be like a doomsday scenario, like a couple of days or weeks, total chaos. And then afterwards, there would just be a snapshot made what happened prior to the attack. So even if you lost your coins in between, very likely they would make a snapshot prior to that, and then, because the community decides, right? It's the masses of the community decides. So the snapshot was made, and then with the new algorithm, it would just start from the last kind of known point when there was no attack. So that is, in my opinion, the most likely outcome. Thank you.
Dr. Julian, my name is Michael O from CEO World. I want to ask you, can this cryptocurrency ever replace the currency that we are now using? After all, the present currency are nothing but paper printed by governments, not backed by gold. In the past, during the days of gold standard, they are backed by gold. So where do you see cryptocurrency go in relation to the local currency, the currency that we're using?
Excellent question. I think,
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent question. I think here, same answer. It's not going to be one replacing the other. It's going to be a merger. I know for a fact, because we are working with a lot of governments. I speak with a lot of governments. I'm flying tonight, for example, to Australia, where there's a lot of central regulators. There's a so-called payment summit, where it's really all about finance and regulation and currencies and so on. And I'm also invited there to talk from the blockchain side. And I know for a fact that many, many central authorities are very open to cryptocurrencies because of its upsides. I think no one, including myself, and no one knows what's going to be the perfect cryptocurrencies. What are the features of a perfect cryptocurrency? So I think at the moment we're just playing around, and regulators let us play in the little sandbox, and they're like, okay, kids, go and play. And once we know what works, the grown-ups come and they create their centralized, not centralized, it's a mix, cryptocurrency that has the advantages. That doesn't mean that something like Bitcoin would go out of business, because again, it would be the rescue, the place to go to if regulators would screw up. And you see this with gold. As soon as people trust the economy, they trust governments, they trust countries, the gold price goes down. And as soon as there's war, as soon as something is about the economy in the US or anywhere else, the gold price shoots up. So I see it very, very similar in this case. So it's never gold replacing the dollar. It's never the dollar replacing gold. I think Bitcoin is going to be very, very similar. Very great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we make this last question or two short questions? These are the last two questions. Sorry, because I'm really out of time. Yeah. So let's make two last questions.
Yeah. Thank you a lot for the analogy of the stones. That was really, really good. I'm wondering, you said really like simple problems, right? Or like basically that's are the best because that's how everyone adopts it faster. So what are some like use cases that you envision and you foresee? Like some of the use cases that can be really, really applicable to like daily life, right? So I'm asking for like the possible problem solutions that you see Bitcoin or blockchain changing the game, right? I mean, the cats, it's cool, but it's really like just kind of hype. Like how can you solve problems?
I think any use case where you have to trust something or someone, and that trust can be put into a blockchain, and that's where we're going to win. So you entrust companies with your data. You entrust companies that if you pay them, that the insurance covers you if something happens to you. What if they don't? The problem about an insurance is you don't need them unless you need them. And that's a very, very small use case. And it's a huge economic power. So whenever you are in life, a car, a plane, a train, anything where you put trust into this thing or someone, this very moment, a decentralized system has huge upsides if it gets combined with some part of centralization to have some leadership, to have some guidance. Anything. And I mean, there's billions of things, right? I mean, you just walk outside. You have an elevator. Do you trust that elevator? Yeah, you should, because, I mean, very unlikely that something happens, right? You trust your driver, or you trust the taxi driver. You should, but, I mean, there's always something. So anything that you trust, that you have to trust, that is a use case. And then you need to think about, what if this was just one cell of the body? How would a system like this look like? Social media, data, anything there is huge. Putting diamonds on. Who owns a diamond? It's very, very powerful. Paintings, art, anything where trust, ownership of these kinds of sorts. Because ownership is always trust. Do I trust someone that I actually own this thing? Yeah, thank you. Last question, thank you.
Hello, hi, I'm Razmi Ibrahim, I'm founder of Stallion Creative. Just to get your comments on the, Singapore is about to get its first Bitcoin dispute trial. This is due because the virtual currency market currently unregulated in Singapore. So what is your comments about this?
I'm not 100% sure on the question. My comments on if Singapore is regulating cryptocurrencies, or if they are not, is this a yes or no question, or my comment on regulating cryptocurrencies?
Because a legal dispute involving international commercial court is first trial at Singapore about Bitcoin dispute.
Okay, so at this very moment, and I'm talking today, December 12th, 2017, Singapore, again, just I think 3 weeks ago, and we are really close with the authorities there. It's called MAS. They are not regulating cryptocurrencies, and to my knowledge, they are not attempting to regulate cryptocurrencies. What you might be pointing to is something what many, many governments are looking for is creating their own cryptocurrency. And yes, Singapore there is on the front run. They have a project called UBIN, U-B-I-N, and they're working on this project to have their own cryptocurrency. But at the moment, I'm not aware of, there's Japan who sees cryptocurrencies a bit more regulated, but in a good way. There is Korea who does, and Australia a little bit, but other than that, most countries have a stance on, yes, you have to pay taxes on it, but we don't see ourselves in charge to regulate these currencies. At the moment, again, we are the 12th of December, and in this ecosystem, weeks pass by like in other ecosystems, years, so it's insanely fast. So, yeah, thank you so much for this question. Hey, everyone, thank you so much. If you have any other questions, feel free to talk to me afterwards. If you want to take some pictures or something, just let me know, and would be very looking forward. Of course, if you used our app, our card, read our book, with this, have a nice rest of the conference. Thank you so much.